Dallas builders are making a lot of quiet moves right now. Sales are slowing, profits are slipping, and behind the scenes, they're making the moves they need to make to keep their heads above water. Still, there's a lot going on here that you need to know about. A few months ago, we had a client with a home under construction, and we noticed the builder's website was advertising a lower base price on the specific home they were having built. Well, we reached out to the builder asking if they could lower the base price for our client since it was the same house. Well, they said no. They wouldn't lower the base price for our buyer because the new base price reflected less house. What used to be standard wasn't standard anymore. Now buyers were getting less, but it's at a lower price. So the builder made it look like a sale, right? Prices going down, when in fact their profit line stayed the same. Look at it this way. Picture walking down the aisle in Home Depot and you see all these tub faucets. Like some are $300, some are just $200. Well, your builder switches to the $200 faucet and is able to lower the base price. Like maybe the pendant lights over the island aren't quite as nice. Maybe the baseboards are smaller, all right? Either way, what you need to have in mind here is the same. Now, more than ever, you must distinguish between what's standard and what's not. All right, when you are walking through that model home, you need to know everything from what kind of baseboards you're getting to what brand appliances, because in order to lower the prices, some of these builders are lowering what used to be standard. Something else you should know that is happening behind the scenes is that builders are quietly selling more and more to investors than ever before. If you're familiar with new construction, you'll know that new construction generally doesn't sell to investors. In fact, this is a great thing for new home buyers. It protects the subdivision's aesthetic. But now that builders are finding themselves in need, they've opened up way more sales to investors all behind the scenes. And I don't mean the occasional landlord buying one or two homes. I am talking about bulk deals with a lot higher volume. So how do we know? Well, as realtors, we can track the closed sales. When you see a brand new home marked as sold, all cash, with no contribution towards closing costs, that's almost always an investor sale. And lately, there have just been more and more of those transactions showing up in the sales data. You might think it doesn't matter who buys the house next door, okay, but it does. When investors dominate, neighborhoods change. Rentals aren't maintained like owner-occupied homes, and corporate landlords rarely care about things like fences or paint or landscaping. So over time, the whole street loses curb appeal, and a lot of times values will suffer. I mean, even if you keep your home pristine, neglected houses around you are going to drag it down. And guess what? Builders, they don't advertise how many homes they're selling to investors. So listen to me when I tell you, okay? You have to ask. Every community is going to have a policy as to whether selling to investors is limited or unrestricted. And I'll tell you what, I have become more and more a fan of HOAs that limit them from the very beginning. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that builders right now will do anything to protect appraised values. And that's because one recorded sales price doesn't just affect the buyer of that particular home. It affects the value of every other home in the neighborhood. And this is where forward commitments work so well. The beauty of a forward commitment, okay, at least from the builder's perspective, is that it never shows up where the public can track it. You won't see it in MLS data, okay? You won't see it on a closing disclosure, and it doesn't get logged as a seller's contribution toward a buyer's closing costs, okay? So why is that? Well, because the forward commitment happens before a buyer ever enters the picture, okay? It's a back-end deal with the lender that essentially creates an interest rate floor for future buyers, and it enables sales prices to stay strong. Now, we realtors talk a lot about the MLS, okay? You're gonna hear us throw that word around a lot. What you probably didn't know is that the MLS is tightly governed. You have to record exactly what the home sold for, okay? There's no fudging it. Then when a home is being appraised, appraisers go to the MLS data to get the math done. And this is why builders work so hard to avoid dropping prices outright. Protecting those appraisals is everything to them. Lowering the price directly, that's visible, okay? It's permanent. And once it's in the comps, okay, it cannot be undone. It affects the appraised value for the entire community. So builders would so much more rather throw in appliances or upgrades or closing cost credits rather than to cut deep on the actual sales prices. Do you remember why I said builders are getting into all of this questionable behavior in the first place? It's because they have to keep their heads above water. In a strong market, any builder can thrive. But in the market we have right now, many builders are struggling. And that leads us straight into the next red flag that you need to be aware of. Some builders are actually going bankrupt. Like some are losing their inventory to foreclosure. So if you're considering very small builders who are privately owned, okay, this might be cause for concern. All right, your big exposure is, will the builder be around long enough to honor their warranty? Okay, or how about this? Will they even finish your home while it's under construction? So my recommendation, okay, look for the deep pockets. Now, usually I prefer when a builder services the warranty themselves, but if you're considering a little known private builder, the opposite is true. Okay, so let's watch for that warranty being sold to a third-party provider. I mean, even then, you can have a warranty company kick it back to the builder saying it's not their problem. And chances are at that point, right, if you've got a bankrupt builder, you're gonna end up out of luck. Like we saw this happen in droves in 2008. Like one happened in our own neighborhood where only a handful of homes were built, and then, it went into foreclosure and it literally sat undeveloped for years. So those homeowners had to look at overgrown, weedy lots for years, waiting for a new builder to come in. So rule of thumb here, okay, I do not care how nice that model home is. That does not validate the builder. So what you want to do is you want to research them and make sure that your builder, whichever one you're choosing, has deep pockets. Profits are seriously down, and in many ways this is a storm for them. They need to be able to weather the storm. We just watched a small-time builder in Weatherford lose several of their brand new homes on 2-acre lots that went into foreclosure. And this was just a couple of months ago. Okay, and the prices the homes sold for, as low as $259,000. All right, so think about that. Brand new construction sitting on 2 acres, selling for $259,000 in foreclosure. Our home builders, they need things to turn around. All right, builder sentiment is at an all-time low, and they are really watching the market and hoping for a change. They want to see that 10-year treasury move so they can see mortgage rates drop. And all eyes are on the Fed, hoping for the signal that will get things started. Something you need to expect with our builders is they are hyper vigilant of market conditions, and they will change their incentives and their discounts on a dime. The specials they offer, the forward commitments, the rate buydowns, they are all carefully worded to apply only to select homes. Okay, so these builders, they're hedging their bets to be prepared if the market turns. And there are plenty of ways, okay, that they can do this, for this to happen, all right? There's usually verbiage built right into the contract, such as the convenience clause, where builders can back out of a contract for no reason. Many contracts allow 30 days for upper management to sign before the contract is actually executed. If prices go up, they have options to take advantage of that. Incentives, of course, are another example. I've mentioned this before, but it bears mentioning again. We recently had this happen with Beazer Homes. They sent our client an email advertising what sounded like a blockbuster rate deal. They were advertising a 3-2-1 buy down stacked on top of a forward commitment. So on paper, it looked incredible. 1.99% the first year, 2.99% the second, 3.99% the third, and then locked at 4.99% for the rest of the loan. So that is one of the most aggressive incentive packages you can find. And the ad even highlighted the exact community our buyers were interested in. We called to get the details for our clients, and the story had changed. Suddenly, the home our buyers had their eye on didn't qualify. The only way they could get the advertised buy down was by tacking another $20,000 onto the price of the house. So we asked the obvious follow-up: which homes do qualify? Okay, you want to hear what their answer was? None. Not a single property in the community was actually eligible. The only path to that shiny incentive was agreeing to raise the purchase price they were advertising by $20,000. At that point, this felt way less like a special and a whole lot more like a bait and switch, okay? When we pushed back on it, the sales rep immediately pointed out the select homes verbiage in the fine print, even though the ad specifically included that neighborhood. You know, first they say those homes qualify, and then they say no, they don't. The verbiage in their ads, in their contracts, okay, it all allows them to hedge their bets and change their prices on a dime, and you need to be aware of that. Another thing we're seeing, and I wouldn't say this is necessarily new, but you need to know it happens, is builders are putting in profit in other areas. All right, for example, some builders add in a whole charge called the builder fee, and they add this in at closing, and you don't know it's going to be in there. Like, we actually saw this in a transaction with Lennar. Days before closing, we were reviewing it, and out of nowhere is this extra $1,800 charge. Like, it has nothing to do with the lender or closing. It's just extra profit that Lennar has slipped in. Your purchase price is actually $1,800 more than what you thought it was. Or look at it this way. If Lennar offered to pay $1,800 towards your closing costs, all right, that's essentially a lie, because the builder is charging $1,800 as a builder fee and then saying that they'll pay $1,800 towards your closing costs. So I hope you're seeing that there's no credit towards your closing costs at all here. They're just shifting numbers around. Speaking of closing costs, that's another way builders add in profit. They will raise closing costs with the use of their affiliated lender. And again, the costs aren't really for the loan itself. They're just there to add to the company's profit. Remember how I was talking about pricing and builders wanting to hold on to that appraised value? Well, we need to talk about price manipulation. We are talking jacking up home prices, then having huge sales and discounts. So this is a biggie that I cannot emphasize enough, because good old Texas is a non-disclosure state. So what does that mean in plain English? Well, HomeLight sums it up nicely, okay? If you live in a non-disclosure state, sales prices aren't recorded publicly. So if you want that information, you have to work with a licensed professional, such as a realtor who can access the MLS, all right? Otherwise, you are guessing. And builders, they take advantage of that by confusing pricing as much as they can. Now, if you're relocating from a place like California or Washington or New York, this can feel completely foreign. All right, you're used to being able to check what a property actually sold for. Well, here in Texas, you can't. And this is where builders take full advantage. An individual seller can't manipulate an entire neighborhood, all right? They've really only got one house to sell, right? Well, a builder has dozens of homes in the same community. I mean, sometimes even hundreds. And they can move prices around like puzzle pieces, all right? One week, they'll raise prices. The next week, they'll slash them. And in between, they'll layer on incentives that make it almost impossible to tell whether you're actually getting a good deal. Talk to a sales consultant and you will probably hear things like, you know, we're running a huge sale, prices have just been cut. And then come back the next week and they might tell you, well, you better lock in now because, you know, prices are going up on Monday. So both statements could technically be true, but neither tells you whether the home was priced correctly to begin with. So the danger is that you hear price cut and you assume you're getting a good deal. Or you hear price hike and assume you're beating the market by buying now. In reality, both scenarios can lead you to overpaying. Now, you don't have to live in a no man's land of wondering what a home is worth, okay? That's where we come in as your realtor. We lean hard into the closed sales and provide the reports that show what a home should be listed for in the first place by using those closed sales as an anchor. It would be far more convenient if realtors, especially realtors like me, weren't a part of the equation. Like if we weren't providing those pesky market analysis showing what the home actually should be selling for. So all this time, I've been telling you what these builders won't tell you. Well, now I'm going to tell you exactly what they're more than happy to tell you. Okay, you ready? Here it is. If you don't already have a realtor, they will offer a stand-in that comes with a buyer's commission rebate. Basically, this is a realtor in name only who doesn't provide any services. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is probably one of the most misleading traps that buyers fall into. And I get it. What happens is a buyer feels they have stumbled upon an untapped opportunity that's kind of hush-hush, right? No one else knows about it. And the ones who are most vulnerable here are the ones who are the most financially intelligent. Okay, they have saved carefully and they've gotten to where they are today through having an eye for strategic opportunity, and they're led to believe that this is one. And it's so sad because it goes right along with price shuffling and fake discounts and how buyers get psychologically misled into thinking they have a win when they don't. So let me set the backstory here as to why this is so misleading. All right, let's say I ask for a $500,000 loan. Lender gives me $500,000. Now he doesn't have that money to lend to anyone else, right? Well, no, he would run out of money real fast to make mortgages if that's how it worked. The government doesn't want that, so it created Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, whose mission is to provide liquidity. How does it do that? Well, the FDIC explains it provides liquidity to the mortgage market by buying loans conforming to certain standards, thus enabling lenders to make new loans with the proceeds from the sale. Did you catch that conforming to certain standards part? Because that's where our big deception comes into play. How much money you can get from interested parties is capped based on how much your down payment is. And guess what? Both the seller builder and the realtor are what Fannie Mae calls interested parties. Fannie Mae explains it this way: interested parties to a transaction include but are not limited to the property seller, the builder or developer, the real estate agent or broker. So what I am telling you here, okay, is if your loan cap is 3%, you cannot collect 3% from a realtor rebate and another 3% from the lender. All right, there is no backdoor here. There's no strategic opportunity for buyers to take advantage of here. You are capped at how much you can accept, and it does not matter who it comes from. So there are a few things that are in play here. The first is that now the builder isn't allowed to pay towards the buyer's closing costs. He can't. I mean, sorry, the amount is maxed out. It's already come from the realtor's commission rebate. Rules are the rules. So now the builder has actually just increased his profit. And at the same time, the buyer feels they have had a strategic win. They have tapped into money that very few people know about, and they probably feel very accomplished. But what they don't realize is this is just more emotional manipulation. It's that same concept of hiking prices and then doing massive discounts. It is all designed to confuse the buyer and make them feel they've gotten the deal of the century. And here's the thing, the builder was already planning on paying your closing costs, especially if you used a realtor with strong negotiating skills. Instead, you got the exact same money towards your closing costs that you would have gotten anyway, except now you don't have representation. Without a realtor, you won't know what the sales price should be in order to negotiate successfully. You fall prey to all that pricing manipulation because you don't have access to closed sales. If a house is ridiculously cheaply built, you're not going to have a realtor to point that out before money changes hands. If the contract is predatory, you won't have a realtor reading that with you. You probably won't even catch when you're being taken advantage of on your closing costs because you don't know what to look for. And these are things that you should never have to put up with. I mean, for example, some builders, like Beazer, require a deposit before they'll even let you see the contract. And they will tell you, well, that's just the norm. That's how it always works. And with some of them, all right, you'll discover after the fact that only part of that deposit is refundable if you don't end up buying. But you didn't have a realtor to warn you about that. And that money shouldn't have to change hands just to see a contract. So you getting a commission kickback at closing, which you thought was such a strategic win, it was really just a way for the seller to not have to pay your closing costs. Those same closing costs that he probably would have paid anyway if you had a strong negotiator for a realtor. So before you fall for this ruse, okay, study this concept, this rule of contribution limits, okay? You are not getting a hidden opportunity. You're just falling prey to another pricing scam. At the end of the day, builders are not evil people, okay? They're not nefarious, but they are smart. All right, they're gonna do whatever they can to protect their profits in a challenging market. Now more than ever, you cannot go into new construction blind. Now, if I've got you in all-out research mode, okay, a great next step is to check out this playlist where I have uncovered the dirt on dozens of individual Dallas home builders. In the meantime, this is Wendy Pennell, your Dallas Realtor, and I'll catch you on the next video.